There we go. Um, so welcome everybody. Welcome to our weekly gathering, Innerspace Journeys. Today, this idea of chaos is something that I think, if I'm honest, I've been just getting my notes organized here. If I'm honest, I think I've been dancing with chaos my whole life. And I think it's really only recently that I have begun to really claim that. And claim that aspect of my nature, claim that aspect of my being. You might want to make sure all your bells and whistles are turned off, any devices that you don't need, have them on vibrate or airplane mode. Um, and this idea of chaos, I think, is one of those things, if we're talking about like the fundamental aspects of the human experience. One of the things that I find so fascinating about this human experience and just these sort of paradoxical states in general, right? The fact that, we just say there's 8 billion of us right now on the planet, or that's the latest story. Who knows if that's true? I don't, but let's just run with it. So there's 8 billion people on the planet. There's 8 billion versions of reality. There's 8 billion individual and unique relationships with the divine, God, source, the universe, whatever you call that. There are 8 billion completely different, completely unique, like a thumb, like your thumbprint or your fingerprint that is only unique to you. And at the same time, the commonalities of our human experience are unmistakable. There's something we can't ignore. We all go through similar experiences. We all go through these similar themes, and none of us escapes it. Whether it's this lifetime or one in the past or one that's upcoming, we will, each of us, in our own experience, have the engagement and the dance with all of these states of being, and one of them is chaos. Nobody is exempt from the experience of chaos. And I think chaos and transformation, and in my newsletter that I sent out on Friday, I was thinking about this. I had posted, what I was calling these divine partners, right? Masculine, feminine, light and dark, beginning and ending, physical and metaphysical. And I put chaos and transformation in that note or in that list. And I started thinking about it. And I was like, okay, but I don't know if chaos and transformation are necessarily dual partners. Maybe it's more chaos and order. Maybe those are the dual partners, but this idea of transformation as an aspect of the nature of chaos, as an outcome of the experience of chaos, I just could not get away from the idea of chaos and transformation as partners, even if it's just for the sake of today's discussion. The whole point of these gatherings, well, there's a couple of points. Number one is just to create a space where we can meet regularly and have that sense of community and connection, but also to really focus on these experiences, these topics, and these subjects that are a part of the human experience and that every human engages or encounters in some way. So the idea of chaos, and especially as a topic as we're moving into this year, which is going to be chaotic. There is no way around it. So really what I think is the question really then becomes is, what is your role when chaos descends? Where can you find yourself within chaos? What is the point of chaos? What purpose does it serve? And as I spoke this morning in my newsletter reminder, one of the biggest aha moments kind of smacking me across the side of the head and really woke me up was the realization, and this was last summer, that there are parts of self that absolutely thrive in chaos, that love chaos, and that actually seek it and nurture it and invite it. And why, right? What point could we have of a part of us wanting to actually instigate and activate chaos? Let's talk about the idea of chaos. Chaos, really, the idea of chaos came from, mythology. And chaos was actually one of the first primordial gods. Chaos preceded kind of everything else. And where's my chat? There you are. And it's often spelled with a K. But chaos was one of the primordial gods, one of the first to emerge out of creation. Now, depending on what's the word I'm looking for? Which version of the story you're reading. Sometimes chaos is seen as a male, sometimes chaos is seen as a female or a masculine or a feminine energy. I just see chaos as a state of being. I don't think it necessarily has a gender. Chaos in its literal translation means the gap between heaven and earth. And I love this idea that there's earthly order and that there's heavenly order, and in the middle is this chaotic state, and that we move through these states of chaos to either ascend or descend in our form. But I was thinking about this as I was kind of gathering some bits of info to share with you today. There are many indigenous cultures that see humans as the bridge between heaven and earth. And I started thinking about that. Are humans essentially a chaos agent? Are we kind of the rogue being in the hierarchy of beings? And I like that idea. There's one more piece that I think is important. Chaos is also self-created. There was no deity that created chaos. Chaos simply emerged. So that started me thinking, okay, if chaos is the space between heaven and earth, if some cultures see humans as occupying the space between heaven and earth, and if chaos is self-created, as we are, right? Spirit wanted to know what it was like to be Amar, so she said, hey, I'm going to give birth to the being who will call himself Amar, and it's just me. So I just created another aspect of myself so that I could know myself in a way I've never known myself before. So I just wanted to inject those bits of knowledge into this conversation because I think it's interesting to look at it from that perspective, that chaos and humans, we actually have a lot in common. And we actually kind of operate and function in the same way. So thinking about this idea of chaos, and I'm going to pull in a little bit of some science. So if you're a science nerd, you may appreciate this moment. But the law of thermodynamics, right? It tells us that matter and energy are not created or destroyed. They're merely transformed. So in order, and we say this all the time, right? If you want to make an omelet, you have to break some eggs. That to me is a perfect example of this law. We have an egg, which exists as a form of matter and energy. We then break it open, take the contents, put them under heat, and do all sorts of other things to them to turn them into something else. The same energy and matter still exists in a way, but the transformation that the egg goes through from the egg when it comes out of the chicken, and then our scrambled eggs or our cake or whatever it is that we're using to bake or cook with the egg. So this idea of transformation, and that to me is the sweet spot with chaos. I often see there are certain things in our human experience and through our spiritual journey that we often try to avoid as long as possible. And chaos is one of those. And we often enter into, not often, always, almost always, I have yet to see a human that didn't do this or that hasn't done this. We enter into our spiritual experience with the same sort of judgment of right or wrong, good or bad, punishment or reward. And we think like, oh no, chaos is bad. I don't want bad things. I don't want to be punished. That's something to avoid. When the irony of it all is the only path to liberation is one where you embrace all that you are, including your chaotic parts, including the shadow aspect. So I think chaos is one of those ones that often gets associated with the unwanted or the things that we don't want or the things that we try to avoid. Baby, chaos is as much a part of being a human as breathing is. It's just a part of the deal. It's a part of creation. Chaos is an agent of transformation. So when I think of chaos, I think of it as two sides of the same coin. Right? I think of it, chaos and order, they're the same thing. So maybe transformation is the side of the coin, right? Maybe transformation is what we go through from chaos to order and then order to chaos. I think chaos often comes to soften our rigidity, right? If I'm too into my masculine, mental, intellectual perspective, and I have a very, very rigid belief system and perspective that tells me, no, there are right ways and wrong ways. Sometimes chaos comes as to inspire us to create order out of disarray, right? Maybe we're too much in our feminine receptive. Maybe we're too much in just our feeling and being, and we have yet to take an action. The way I look at it is the masculine without the feminine is just violence and aggression and destruction. There's no point to it. The feminine without the masculine is just thoughts and feelings and ideas, but nothing ever gets made, nothing ever gets created. And how many of you have had an experience of not acting until you had to? I certainly have. I absolutely have. Those things that we just like, we like to ignore, pretend they don't exist. Oh no, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And then suddenly it comes in and says, you have no choice. You have to deal with me. To me, I think that's also the realm of chaos. Sometimes chaos is the only thing that will wake us up. And if we're looking at the world right now and what's happening out there on that stage, chaos is present. Chaos is making itself known with good reason. Things need to change. From my perspective, chaos is always a sign of one thing, and that is collapse. Collapse creates massive releases of energy. Think about the atom, right? With Oppenheimer, I haven't seen the movie, but everyone's raving about it. The guy that really was the father of our nuclear technology and split the atom. That's how we got that much power, is by breaking something open and releasing that energy from the form. So when chaos is present, it is always a sign that transformation and rebirth are not far behind. Because I need that energy, right? If I'm going to transform myself, there's a whole lot of energy that I need to catalyze that process, right? If I'm going to drive my car across country, I'm going to need a lot of fuel. And chaos takes a structure, breaks it open, releases the energy that was the thing supporting that structure. And then that structure falls and the energy's there saying, okay, where do I go? What do I do? What's my point? What's my purpose? What's the intention? What are you going to make out of this clay? So it's actually an invitation to move towards chaos, or at least not retreat, because that's where the raw materials for creation is. It's in the center of that chaos. So chaos requires a complete and total breakdown, a complete and total release, a surrender, and a detachment from. Think of the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. The butterfly has to completely, or the caterpillar actually has to completely release its attachment to the identity of the caterpillar in order to transform. If the caterpillar were able to stop the process of transformation that happens in that cocoon, most likely it would, over and over and over and over and over. Thank God the caterpillar does not try to stop its transformation, because we would not have the butterfly. But I promise you, if the caterpillar had the same cognitive function as the human, I guarantee you 99% of the caterpillars would resist the cocoon until the last possible moment, because the attachment to the old form is addicting. We don't like to talk about this. We don't like to talk about how there are parts of us that are addicted to our suffering. Not because it likes suffering, but because it just understands it. But because I would rather be able to live my life with my eyes closed, half asleep, than have to be wide open, ripped open, right? The spiritual awakening is brutal in that sense. The addict in us that knows how to suffer, that knows how to struggle, that knows how to be victimized, that knows how to live as a disempowered individual. Chaos comes in and says, you don't have to live in that cage if you don't want to. But what do most of us do? Hold the cage door shut. No, you're not going to take this away from me. This is who I am. So chaos, I think in many ways, is a divine emissary. I think chaos in many ways is like grief. It's here as an emissary of the divine. And it is not necessarily interested in our own individual agenda of, oh, I'm not ready. Oh, I don't want to. Oh, I don't think I can. Well, you really don't have a point. You really don't have a choice. You're going to surrender eventually. Ilya is asking, do we act because we fear more chaos or because we welcome improvement? I think it depends on how you are defining we. If you say, do we act from the perspective of the mind? Absolutely, the mind acts because it fears chaos. It wants to do everything it can to avoid that because chaos equals no control, which you never had anyway. And I think if we're talking about our perspective from the higher self, from the expanded self, we want chaos. We welcome it because we understand that chaos is only evidence of one thing: change is happening. I think we have, Brenda's asking, do you have a choice on how you need to transform through this chaos experience? Absolutely. Paul Selig talks about, his guides say, every soul comes with a list of experiences that they want to include in any particular incarnation. And you can learn how to bake a cake in a five-star kitchen, or you can learn how to bake a cake in the gutter. It's entirely up to you how you choose to learn. And when we go through that awakening experience and we finally begin to reclaim our sovereignty and our role as the master creator of our human experience, we can say, Spirit, I only want to learn through the upward spiral. I know how to learn through grief and sadness and, frustration and anger and scarcity. I want to grow and learn through joy and expansion and happiness. But guess what? Most humans are only going to do it when they have to. I don't know any human who initially rushes to change. Most of us, if we see a burning building, want to run the other way. And that makes sense. But the soul is always wanting to run face to face with the chaos because it understands that is the leveling up. And like everything else, how we respond to chaos is entirely up to us. Are you the person who, when the storm comes, do you run outside and you're excited to see the thunder and lightning and dance in the rain and let the wind just whip you around? Or are you hiding inside, terrified and afraid, and you don't want to go outside? Either way, you're going to weather the storm. Either way, the storm is going to come and the storm is going to do what the storm is going to do. You can't stop the storm. You can only decide that you're going to celebrate it. And like everything else, your connection to yourself and to that central point, your ability to find the I in the storm and move with the I, move with the center. When you move with the center, you're always in the I. And then you don't have to do anything. When you know how to be at the master level, all you do is sit and receive. It just comes. Opportunity, choose, action, choice. I don't run out and make it. I don't run out and hunt it down. I don't run out and force it. I receive it. There's another thing that I think it's really important to acknowledge here, that there are parts of us that love chaos. There are parts of us that want it. Just like there are parts of us that are really at home being unhappy. Exactly, Ilya. Chaos is. How you perceive it is what creates your experience of it. It's like the weather. The weather isn't here to make your life miserable. The weather isn't coming to get you. The weather is not a punishment for the thing you didn't do yesterday or that horrible thing you did 2 weeks ago. It's just here. It's like the state of energy, the field of energy that we live in. It's unconditional. How do you think you can have free will and not live in an unconditional reality? You can't have one without the other. Free will says it is unconditional. You are allowed, you are loved, you are a part of it, you are an aspect of experience. No matter how hard you try to deny it or escape it, it doesn't change it. It's the same thing with chaos. You can try and outrun it with every fiber of your being, and you may succeed in one lifetime. But your dance with chaos is going to happen inevitably, and it will, because the soul wants it. So chaos holds everything we need. And when we allow ourselves to be the being that we are, that's when we can begin to direct that energy and use it as an aspect of our creations. And chaos just becomes form through that period and that process of transformation. I think about this a lot when I look out here on the yard and all the flowers in the trees that right now are bare and, gray and dry. And I think of the procession of seasons as a really beautiful example of how chaos can become, right? If we think of spring and all of that new energy just bursting up, it is chaotic. I mean, there's just greenery everywhere. Suddenly, like overnight, it just explodes with greenery and it's everywhere. And it doesn't necessarily make sense right away. And it's overwhelming for the senses. And think about, when we were living in caves and eating what we killed for dinner and coming out of that into this bright world where everything is fresh and vibrant. It's overwhelming. It's chaotic. And then we slowly move into summer, and then we transition to this pinnacle of this heat and this intensity and the growth. And then we transition into fall where things start to slow down. And now we're in a different phase of life. Now we're harvesting, now we're receiving. And then winter, when it all goes dormant and it all goes quiet. And I'm looking out right now, and there's like the tangle of old flowers and plants and weeds. It's a mess out there. But underneath the ground, the plants are alive. The seeds are getting ready to sprout. The roots are starting to soften and suck up some of that moisture and starting to send it up the trees. And now the trees are starting to become more flexible and they're starting to bud out. I can see the little buds on there starting to grow. Chaos is a part of our natural organic experience. And the thing is that some of those plants, without the dormancy of winter and without the cold freeze, some of those plants would die. The bulbs, the tulips, the hyacinth, the iris, all of those spring bulbs that we loved, and to see them sprouting in the spring, without a freeze, without a cold dormant period where they are frozen, they would not bloom. They use that dormancy period to replenish and recharge themselves. so that they have the energy then to explode in that eruption of chaos in the spring. And all we have to do, exactly, Lisa, is we just look at nature. She shows us all of the time. This is the natural cycle and rhythm that you are a part of. We humans, one of our favorite mythologies is that somehow we lord over nature. That somehow, yes, we are a part of it, but not really, because we're separate and we're in control. We can manage it. We can force the planet to do what we want. Yeah, no, no. The planet doesn't need us. She could shake us all off like that. So when we pay attention to the rhythms and the cycles that gave birth to us, when we really align with the flow of life, we can see that it is built upon a foundation of chaos. Chaos is what you were before you were a body, a being in a body. Yes, and Mother Nature, a childbirth, natural childbirth shows us this. Literally consuming for 9 months food and water and turning it into another human. That is the most like clear example of transformation and chaos that I think exists. And the intensity and the sometimes the danger and the endurance that is required sometimes for childbirth. Like, it is a messy, chaotic, loud, painful, sometimes even life-threatening experience. And no one's controlling it. They're managing it. But anybody who has ever given birth or has been present for births or has worked in the healthcare industry knows that things can go sideways like that. So again, when we understand that this is a part of a natural rhythm of creation, and we accept the fact that that is the rhythm that we are born from, we begin to see, oh, chaos isn't some foreign state that I've never experienced before. Chaos isn't something to run from. Chaos is literally what gave birth to me. So why on earth would I seek to separate myself from the very energy that gave birth to me? So thinking about chaos, and are you able to reframe your relationship with it and see it as a divine emissary? You may not like it. You may feel really uncomfortable and awkward in its presence, but that's okay. I can assume that the first time you meet an angel or a member of your star family face to face in physical form, that's probably going to be a little awkward too. So when we allow ourselves to realize that we are already a part of that thing and we can't escape it, we can't unwind ourselves from that. It's what we are. It is an integral part of our experience. And in fact, Native Americans, many Native American cultures, when they would weave their blankets, they would actually purposely make a mistake in the design because they would say that's where the devil gets out. That's where the chaos gets out. They understood that they needed to leave a little exit for that energy that cannot necessarily be controlled to go. Let it out. And I think we spend so much time trying to suppress chaos, trying to repress it, trying to pretend it doesn't exist, trying to hide from it. And when we let it be in the room, we see the power that it holds. Yeah, Lisa, but I think our link between chaos and violence is not a real one. It's imagined. Because joy can bring violence, right? I can be in a joyful state and suddenly it just smacks me across the head. So I think that the human fears chaos because we believe that we believe that we have control. We believe we have control. And so anything that reminds us that we do not have control, we try to run from it as fast as we can. So chaos is something that's inescapable. So the question is, how can you reframe your relationship with it? I had said in my newsletter this morning, is chaos a friend, a frenemy, or a foe? And I think all three of those are accurate assessments, and all three of those can be true, and it all depends on your relationship with it. So dancing with chaos. Yes, violence is a reaction. And what I know is that it's the ego that reacts and the heart responds. I think chaos is consciousness. We need to bring intention to it. Darkness, shadow, chaos, endings, these are just as much a part of spirit as love and light and angels and beginnings. So when we remember who we are, fear collapses. When I engage my life through the lens of my historical mind, I see boogeymen hiding around every single corner. When I move through my experience from a deeper place, from a higher perspective, then I understand that all of this is simply me. This is only a reflection. This is only a reflection. So how we deal with chaos will just be dependent upon our level of understanding. It's like everything else. When you don't understand how the world works, you believe that you are at the mercy of it. You believe things happen to you. When you have a deeper understanding and a higher knowledge of who and what you really are, you eventually stop trying to separate yourself from it. So deciding for yourself what you would like your relationship with chaos to be, because it already exists. And whether or not you consciously engage with it does nothing to eradicate it from your experience. There are certain elements that are just a part of creation, that are just a part of how energy works, are a part of how geometry expands and collapses. So when we can see chaos as a companion, then we can work with it. Then we can partner with it. Then we can allow ourselves to let go of the things that no longer work. And I see this a lot even in like our healthcare system. I've been thinking a lot about this lately, how Western medicine especially loves to turn symptoms into disease. In fact, almost the entire Western medical system is built upon turning symptoms into a disease. So when you turn towards yourself and you claim accountability, you take responsibility for all of the bright, shiny stuff and the dark, crunchy stuff, and all of it you accept as a part of who you are. Now chaos is a tool. Now chaos is something that I can allow. Now chaos is something that I can simply watch and ask, what do you need from me? What part can I play? So we need both. We need chaos and order. We need light and dark. We need masculine and feminine. We need our health and our illness, our death and our birth. We need it all. And not one is better. Not one is worse. One is not a punishment. One is not a reward. It is just a part of life. You're not being punished, except by yourself. So we can see that as we allow chaos to come in and we allow chaos to reveal itself, and we remember how to integrate chaos into our experience as a part of a much larger order, it's like homeopathy, right? In a homeopathy, you actually take something that creates a symptom. Just as an example, like if you have eczema, a very common homeopathic treatment for eczema is poison ivy. So you look for the thing that creates your symptom and you introduce that thing in really, 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 really small doses to the body. So then you give the body the information that it needs to understand how to assimilate eczema. How do I learn how to assimilate chaos? By allowing myself to have tiny sips as often as possible. I say this all of the fucking time. The reason the athlete practices and the reason that the performers rehearse is so that by the time it matters on opening night, on game day, I already know what truth feels like. I already know what it feels like to be in the zone. The reason that I dance with chaos in little small ways as often as I can, so that by the time she shows up in her fucking category 10 hurricane, cool. My system is attuned to chaos. My system knows how to dance with that. I'm not afraid. I'm good. Give me a second. I just need a sandwich and a glass of water and let's go. So it is your willingness to invite these states of being that allows you to master them. It is your willing to practice that gives you the ability to just sit down and play without thinking about it. So when we allow our system to slowly introduce itself to these elements, or these elements to slowly introduce themselves to our system, it's not so much of a shock. And I understand how to do it. And I've given my body the experience of it. You know, if we think about things on the quantum level, I want to kind of reverse this, right? So from a quantum perspective, if you have a body of water that's really polluted and toxic and nasty, even just one little drop of pure, clean water dropped into that body of water will purify the entire thing. Because what it does is it reminds each molecule of water what its perfected state looks like. When you dance with yourself at that highest level, when you have even a split second of interfacing with yourself at that purest level, that knowing, that energy, that geometry gets into your system and it begins a process, an awakening. It's a string of events that happen. And it just happens. It's like puberty. It just happens. And you can't control it. You can't stop it. Yes, okay, we can talk about medication and all that. But I mean, from a perspective of a human that hasn't been fucked with, it just happens. It's the same thing. When you make friends with chaos and stop trying to hold the door shut and you let her in and you say, hey, come on in, she'll say, okay, this is going to be intense. We got a whole lot of stuff to collapse. Your identity's going, your job is going, your relationship is on the skids. But I promise you, if you let this process occur, you will come out the other side smelling like a rose and looking like $1,000,000. But what do? Most of us say no, and we stop that process altogether, or we get kind of halfway through. And then we change our mind to decide, no, I can't surrender. I have to control it because the universe doesn't know what it's doing. Another one of our favorite myths, that somehow we know better than the eternal consciousness that keeps it all spinning in the right direction. I digress. But when you just allow yourself to be a part of the process that gave birth to you, this is not foreign. What have I been saying for 1,000 years, 1,000 lifetimes? You're not learning, you're remembering. You're not healing to change what you are. You're healing to release all the things that you're not that have been piled on top of what you are. So what I want is for someday for you to get to the place with chaos where you are going to go climb that mountain, take off all your clothes, stand butt ass naked on the top of that mountain with the wind whipping around you and say, bring it on, chaos, let's go. Because the only thing I'm going to lose is things that I am not. The only thing I'm going to gain is more of myself. That's it. I think it's both, Ilya, right? Ilya is saying, how are we aware if we perceive a hurricane, a storm, an earthquake? Is this nature's violence or strength and creativity? I think of this often like a mother, right? Like a mother's love can be very soft and very tender. And the embrace of a mother around her child, it is so soft. But it's the same love that the mother yanks the kid out of the crosswalk so it doesn't get hit by the car, or slams the arm across the chest as she slams on the brakes. That could bruise the child, right? She may unintentionally harm the child, but she saved it from a greater harm. So sometimes love feels a little jarring. It's a little abrupt. But it seldom has to be if we're listening. Spirit only has to yell, quote unquote, when we haven't been paying attention. We're looking at all the chaos on the planet. These are not new conversations we are having, but we just haven't fucking been paying attention. So it has to get loud and it has to get ugly and it has to get violent so that it will wake us up. Humans have become convinced that suffering is a noble thing, that somehow it only matters if I suffer and struggle. So Spirit says, okay, if you think that only important things come wrapped in struggle and suffering, then I'm going to show you what's important. And I'm going to wrap it in a whole bunch of struggle and suffering in order to wake you up. And again, it's unconditional. She says, oh, you didn't hear that? Let me turn up the volume. And we go, what's happening? Why is it so bad? Why is it so intense? I don't know. Why don't we rewind the tape of humanity's conversations over the last 1,000 years? And just like I've been saying since the beginning of the year, the answer lies in what we have not done yet. Your liberation lies in the thing that you haven't tried yet. Have you tried welcoming chaos? Have you tried to dance with her? Have you tried sitting and trying to understand? Have you tried just surrendering and saying, take it, go for it? Have you tried surrendering your resistance or softening it a little bit? We just let it in. The only thing it ever destroys are the things that are ready to fall. Chaos is not punishment. Chaos is actually a blessing. So when we surrender to what we are, we are always in our lane. I mean, essentially, what it comes down to, from my perspective, is chaos is just antithetical to the idea of control. So, for myself, the only time that chaos was ever threatening or that I ever got really worked up about it was when it was trying to transform areas of my life that I was still trying to control. Because I thought I knew better. Or I didn't want to deal with it. So I just kept lying to myself and saying, no, this is good. I'm happy here. So chaos, I think, is really one of those master level experiences. And in many ways, it's like grief, in that grief isn't going to leave until grief has decided it's time to go. We can't make it go. Chaos can only vacate once its job is done. These divine emissaries have a very specific purpose, and you're not in charge of it. It is to be received. So let's take, as I'm feeling the call to get in and do our inner work, and I'd like to have more time than less. And clearly from the chat, this is ringing bells. So while we're all worked up into our most chaotic state, let's take that energy into the inner exploration. So let's just take a couple minutes. I'm going to go break some plates. I'm going to drive a car into the ditch and set fire to this tree out here. Just get a little chaos going, and then I'll come back and we'll do our inner energy work, okay? No, really, just like 2 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll do our inner exploration. Okay. It just dawned on me. I think there's that saying, wherever you go, there you are. And I was thinking about this idea of chaos and the judgments that we often hold individually about it. And I just thought, well, if you think chaos is a blessing or a curse, you're right. So maybe it's not even about anything other than just suspending my judgment about it and just allowing it to come in just so I can look at it. Anyway, go ahead and settle in, making sure that any of your devices that you don't need are on vibrate or airplane. Just finding a spot where you can relax and be comfortable. Bye, Lisa. Thank you. So just sit back and get comfortable. Just breathing in nice and deep. And just use that breath to slow everything down. We've been having a really activating conversation. And I felt lots of energy coming to the surface in a very beautiful way. Feels like there's some old belief systems that are ready to collapse, like imminently. What I know is that whatever our relationship with things are, in this instance, chaos, as we make our relationship with it conscious, it's not necessarily always going to require a tremendous amount of effort for us to reframe or recreate our relationship with it. Sometimes just the mere acceptance of it and acknowledgement of something like chaos in our relationship with it, becoming curious about it, that in and of itself can be the process of transformation, is simply just being aware of it. So just using that breath to find your point of connection and dropping into that space, wherever it is. Maybe you feel connected in the higher parts of your form, around the crown and the third eye. Maybe you feel that connection in the throat or the heart. Maybe you feel it deeper in your gut. Wherever it is, just allow yourself to be guided to it. And just feel yourself in the presence of your awareness. And just breathe nice and deep, exhaling fully and completely. And as you're breathing, see if you can draw that breath all the way down to the tips of your toes. There you go. Just settling in and breathing. And as you deepen your connection, and as those internal waters go nice and calm and quiet and still, just settle in. Feel yourself going deeper into that central place in your inner temple. Find yourself there. And just breathe into that space as you arrive fully in that inner temple. And as always, within the inner temple are all of your helpers, your guides, your metaphysical partners, and co creators in spirit. This inner temple also includes all aspects of self, all of you, all of the layers of self, the layers of identity and understanding. It all exists within this space. And as you find yourself within this inner temple, I want to create some spaciousness in there. As you're breathing, just visualize inflating and expanding that space. Finding yourself still connected to the center, but the space around you expands. It is filled with spaciousness. There's a sense of ease, a sense of calm, a sense of being wrapped in this experience of quiet and stillness. The feeling of being free of being fluid and flexible and completely at home with yourself. Good. There we go. I can feel that shift. So just let yourself be present. And all of that spaciousness creates an environment and a geometry that's very stable and very nurturing, where you can really feel that deep connection to your inner self. And now we are simply going to invite the aspects of you, of self, that know how to navigate chaos. The parts of you that know how to thrive in chaos, that actually even love and enjoy chaos, and maybe even are inviting it into your experience. You can just simply see them stepping into the center of the room to join you, in the center of that space. And this is an opportunity simply to familiarize yourself with this aspect of you. Maybe it's a feeling or a physical sensation. Maybe you have a visual. Perhaps you're hearing something. Just trust your experience and allow yourself to simply be present and just watch your little chaos agent. Invite it to come a little bit closer. Just become familiar with the vibe, with the flavor, with the frequency. And as you're breathing now, begin to engage with your chaos agent. Let's begin by asking it, what does it want you to know? Is there a message that it has for you? There's something that it needs you to understand. Again, just trust what you receive. Even if you're not clear what you're receiving, just trust that it will become clear when it needs to. Now we're going to ask another question of your chaos agent. It's going to ask it, what are you trying to do for me? This question is especially powerful if perhaps you've been resistant to chaos or have tried to outrun it or avoid it or deny it. So, what is it that you're trying to do for me? Again, believing and assuming that this is a benevolent visitor. Chaos is not here to punish you or make life hard just to make it hard. There's always a point, there's always an intention, there's always a reason. So, what is it that your little chaos friend is trying to do for you? Now, continuing to explore with your friend Chaos, asking it, what do you need from me? If you're here with a specific purpose, if you have a job to do, then what can I do to support you in doing that job? Now, continuing your dialogue with Chaos, ask it and become curious about what areas of my life could I use your help? Where can Chaos support you? Where can Chaos help and assist you? And now continuing with one more question for your Chaos friend. How can I begin to play or dance with you in ways that are safe for me now to begin to become comfortable with you? So, how can we begin to dance or play in ways that are safe for me now so that I can start to get used to you as an aspect of my life? So that I no longer have to fear or resist you, but can see you as a necessary part of my human experience. And more than that, as a member of my co-creative team. And then just breathe and allow. As you're breathing, feel that frequency of allowing chaos, of accepting it, of befriending it, of becoming familiar with it. We're simply going to allow that energy to begin to move through your system. This is not an invitation for chaos to happen. This is simply the beginning of building an intentional relationship with chaos and letting the body and the mind and the energy system and the emotional field know that chaos is not something to be afraid of. We don't have to go looking for it. But when it arrives, when it steps forward and says, hey, I've got something for you, we can remember how to allow it. There we go. So radiating out from the center. Just feel it beginning to expand into your physical body. There we go. Giving permission to the cells, to the layers of the physical self, the mental self, the emotional and the energetic selves. Chaos is a part of a much larger system. And when we allow it to take its rightful place within our system, it brings a greater balance. There we go. Just letting it gently move through your cells like a sponge that's slowly soaking up water. Just allow ourselves to draw that energy into the body. And slowly, each cell, one at a time, receives the message that chaos is okay. It's just a part of life and it doesn't need to be feared or rejected. There we go. Feel that shift of release, of relief. Feel that tension that has been fighting so hard to resist chaos. Just feel it melting out of your body. It's like a hot knife through butter. It just glides right through that release of that stress and anxiety and the tension of trying to maintain control and trying to get rid of the chaos, trying to prevent it, trying to avoid it or outrun it. Oh, just unclench. Just allow yourself to be. Spending so much energy unnecessarily fighting and resisting and running. There we go. Just allow. And then just gently return to your breath, trusting that this process will continue, that this is simply the beginning of a shift. This doesn't require constant focus or diligence or effort. Just checking in every once in a while, listening to your system, responding as best you can. And just like that drop of pure water into the body of water that is just so toxic and filled with just so much sludge. It's the same thing, the fear of chaos, the resistance to chaos, as we allow just a little taste of the possibility of a benevolent relationship with chaos, it immediately begins to restructure and reform. There we go. So just come back to the breath, breathing in nice and deep. As you're coming back to the room, breathing in nice and deep. As you're coming back to the body, feel yourself fully present back in the room. As you breathe in nice and deep, fully present in the body, back in this moment in time. Take another nice deep breath. Give a stretch. Whenever you're ready, you can come back. So take your time coming back. Reminds me of, I was thinking of this guy that I knew in the early 90s, back in my Seattle days, this guy Gordon, who was a friend and was just one of those crazy people in the best possible sense. Like, he was unpredictable. He was just chaos embodied. And every time we went out, it was wild. It was like, because I mean, I was a wild child in my early 20s, but even for me, he was just a step beyond. And it was just like anytime I would go out with him, it was so like drinking and drugs and insanity. And almost always I would wake up the next day just like, where have I been? Like, what happened? And I always knew anytime that I was down to like hang out with Gordon, it was gonna be chaos. Even if it was like, oh, let's just meet for lunch, let's just go have a coffee. I just came to know over the 10 years that I knew him that it was always going to be bonkers. So in that sense, I see how when chaos shows up, sometimes it is just about intentionally and knowingly saying, yep, I'm jumping into the pool. Yep, here we go. I'm just going to do it. It doesn't have to be that intense. I am that kind of person who will just jump off the cliff and figure out how to fly on the way down. That may not be your flavor. You can go a little bit easier, a little bit slower, a little bit more dipping the toes in before you dive in. But yeah, Matthew, exactly. Gordon, if I knew where Gordon was, I would invite him. And I promise you all, it would be the craziest night of your life. But I think it's just about allowing, becoming curious. Like I have said a million times, and we'll say a million more. Your willingness and your curiosity are the only two things that are required for your experience. So just be curious about dancing with chaos, be willing to become a friend of chaos, and just play. It doesn't have to, we don't have to go from 0 to 100. It doesn't have to go from, it doesn't have to, you can measured chaos, little bits at a time, just a sip, just a taste. It just has to be intentional. That's it. That's it. And then just have fun. So, as always, I appreciate your presence. As always, these gatherings are free of charge, but there are two links there, one for Stripe, one for PayPal. If you feel like you want to offer a little bit of financial chaos, I'm happy to receive it, but not necessary. Again, this replay will live on YouTube, so I'm going to be uploading it today. So if you didn't get the whole thing, or if you want to replay it, you certainly can. The Self-Liberators League is still in early bird pricing, and that will be through the end of the month. You can go to my website, amar.energy, if you want to read about that. I'm so happy you're here. Thank you so much for hanging out today. I hope this was, I like T. Kim New, you're getting your chaos, your chaos filter. So have a fabulous Sunday, everybody. So lovely to see you as always. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Have fun with chaos this week. Like, do some kind of chaos, like, benevolent chaos. You don't have to be like dark chaos, right? You can be benevolent, happy, trickster, kind of Loki, Heyoka empath chaos. That's another thing you may want to look into. I think it's Heyoka empath, and they're like the trickster energy. Like the Heyoka empath is going to say the thing that will trigger you just to trigger you so that you can heal through your trigger. That's that energy. And that's what chaos is. Sometimes we got to be confronted with it. Sometimes, and I speak from experience, sometimes that's the only thing that's going to get our attention is when it is right there and we cannot deny it. And I see you giving side eye, Nicole. Is your chaos just out of screen? Are you looking to the chaos? It's like it's right there. It's about to come in. Have fun this week, everybody. Mwah. Thank you so much. Love you all. I'll see you next Sunday. Bye.